Again, my name is Thomas Gandy, and I kind of got into this repeater thing about 25, 30 years ago, working on two-way radio equipment, bar lights, and the police cars. In fact, I ran in Don Loper back there, and I go way back to some of my previous runnings around the state. But now, since I've been in Jackson, been here, August was 20 years. I've had the opportunity for working with the Jackson Club and CMSARA as of recently with Robert and some others out at the repeater there. But there's a lot of excitement about Fusion. We put a new one up last Friday. Frank Howell and I did over at Anderson Hospital. Got it on the air, got it programmed, got it all working. It's doing real well. It's 443-200. If you're ever over that way, it's got a 136.5 hertz tone on it. I don't have anything about it in this simply because I didn't have that much in my map. But there's a lot going on with Fusion, and I'm kind of just, learning my way through it. But what I wanted to do tonight was just to go through a little bit about digital, talk a little bit about digital, and I'm not going to do a lot of comparisons to D-Star. I know a lot of folks already have done quite a bit of work with D-Star. You've got D-Star. Johnny K, who was at our last club meeting over in the Jackson Club meeting a couple of weeks ago, he came and brought, he's actually got a C4 FM radio, but Johnny is way above my head in D-Star. I don't have a lot of D-Star experience, but I do have some Fusion experience because I put up 4 of them so far. And I've got a FTM400, and I think there's some folks here that have brought some radios tonight as well, so maybe we can demo. Can everybody see the screen okay?
Yes.
All right. So anyway, just a little bit about the DR1 and a little bit about Fusion. It's FM 12.5 kilohertz. It's narrowband. Uses C4 FM. It's got several different modes: F1D, F2, F3E, and it uses what we call 4FSK, or continuous 4 frequency modulation. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. It uses automatic mode select, and I know a lot of folks here have heard us talk about that. That's the nice thing about Fusion, is that it'll allow you to talk analog in, analog out, digital in, digital out. And there's actually some things you can do I'll talk about later with the Fusion to lock it into these different modes. They came in as dual band. They're basically FTM 400s, 2 of them in a cabinet. Robert, didn't y'all had a deal up here where you brought one and opened it up? Yeah. I've got some screenshots in here, and I'll just show you what's inside of it. Comes with 3 power levels, 50 watts, 20 and 10. It's got a backup power supply in it, but you've got to change a jumper inside of it to make it be able to run off the battery. But from what I understand, it will not charge. It only will run off of that battery.
It will charge you. That's what the jumper is for, but it does not charge you.
Okay, so it's probably under dimension. Yeah.
It's designed for full charge.
Yeah. Got your receiver sensitivity. These are just typical receiver sensitivity: 3 microvolts, 270, bit error less than 1%. Analog is 0.2 microvolts at 12 dB sine amp. We're going to talk about that in a minute. It's got a built-in 20 amp switching power supply, which is really cool, very small. And it's 3U rack mountable, so it's really small. And the clubs were offered these things by Yaesu for $500 a piece. So there has been a tremendous adoption of the Yaesu Fusion radio repeaters throughout the amateur community. So a little bit about the standard. C4 FM, like I said, it's channel spacing 12.5 kilohertz. It's narrowband. It uses 4 position frequency shift keying. Modulation rate is 9.6 kilobits, or 9600. Bits per symbol is 2 bits per symbol. And the vocoder it uses is the, let's see, I keep forgetting how to say this. Advanced multi-rate excitation, AMBE +2, which is also the same vocoder used in D-Star, the newer D-Star, and also in the analog P25 radios. 3.6 kilobits per second chip rate in that. And it uses 2-slot time-domain multi-access. And we'll talk about what all these things basically mean in a minute. So as you can see from the diagram here, your voice goes in, the analog digital converter converts it into 1s and 0s, it goes into the vocoder, and the vocoder basically is just a device that takes your speech and looks it up in a little table and then adjust it to where it can be sent out in a digital bit stream. So that little dude right there is what's sending all the information out over the air. It goes out and it's coded. Basically, this is where it's put onto a slot inside of in the spectrum, and then it's modulated, which is the frequency shift keying over here. It's amplified and it goes out to the antenna. So that's the basic path of the digital signal. So back to C4FM. So it's continuous 4-level frequency modulation. It's derived from frequency shift keying, which has been around for a long time. And the way it works is you have 2 states possible with 1 and 0, 4 symbols transmitted, 2 bits per second, or 2 die bits. So these are the bits that are transmitted, these are the symbols, and these are the frequencies that are shifted. In P25 and in DMR, which both use C4FM, these frequency deviations are a bit different. Okay. Once again, I noted down here, I had this, I think Don might have asked me this in the last meeting. It's compatible. It is what P25 Phase 1 uses, but it is not compatible. So this is something that everybody can. It's going to be take a second to demonstrate here, but I want to talk through this because this is kind of what digital is all about. What you have here is this is the phase and the quadrature, what we call IQ or constellation diagram. And what happens is each one of these little dots out here represents one of those die bits, like 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1. And as the frequency is modulated or the bits go down the carrier, this little arrow right here would move between those bits. It just moves all over in that constellation diagram. And as it moves, you're looking at the phase and the quadrature here. As it moves around this little constellation right here, the information is being transmitted down that channel on the TDMA, or down that frequency channel. Another thing that we use when we're looking at modulations, we use something called an eye diagram. And this is kind of a cool thing. In all different modulations, whether it's C4FM, FSK, GMSK, 16 QAM, 4 QAM, all these different modulation technologies, they have one of these little constellations right here. So if you take this constellation and you kind of turn it 90 degrees and look at it, these symbols that we talked about a few minutes ago, which represent each one of those die bits, remember that +1, +3, -1, -3, are represented in this constellation and are represented in the time domain by this diagram. So each one of these state changes basically represents one of these constellations. The cool thing about this eye diagram, and for those of you who have used more advanced service monitors, digital service monitors, as this eye right here, this is called the eye, as it opens and closes, you can determine the signal-to-noise ratio of the signal. You can also determine the amplitude, if there's any issues with the signal. But you look at this little eye right here, it has a height and a width. And as that eye either opens, the width opens up, or as the amplitude opens up, will tell you the quality of the digital signal. I thought this was kind of cool. We have these in the wireless business as well, but it's much more complicated than this because most of our modulations are 16 QAM. In 16 QAM, there would be 4 states per quad right here. So you'd have a total of, what's that, 16? You have 4, 4, 4, and 4 right here, each one of these. So this little arrow would be moving between each one of those states. So this eye diagram over here would be about twice as long, and it would have twice as many state changes in it. But this is a very, very important tool for engineers to look at when they're trying to analyze the signal to make sure that the signal-to-noise ratio is good, trying to make sure that there's not any aliasing or anything happening, any spreading occurring with the signal. So we talked about the modulation technology. Let's talk about the communication type. So in communication right now, we have frequency domain, which we take the frequency, we chop it up into these blocks. We have time domain, where we have one frequency, but we change it in time. And then we have this evil thing down here called code division multiple access, which was basically developed for the military years ago, developed by a company called Qualcomm. This thing right here, they basically take each one of these slices and assign it a code, and they all live together. They all live in the same time and frequency domain. So if you ever look at a CDMA carrier, you'll just notice one big carrier, just a bunch of noise. You don't know what's in there. There's no way to even discern what's going on. Where if you look at a frequency domain character here, if you look at something in the frequency domain, you can actually see each one of these slots. Because you're looking at it, say, for example, on a spectrum analyzer, you can see these slots. So anyways, this is what C4FM uses. So if you look at the C4FM communication type, basically we have some basic amplitude modulation. Here we got single sideband, which is 2.5 kilohertz or 2.7 kilohertz wide. Everybody knows about that are HF. You got your AM, you got your double sideband. You got your FM, 16 kilohertz, big old fat wide 16 kilohertz. Then you have your digital modulations for C4FM and D-Star. D-Star only uses 6.5 kilohertz wide carrier, whereas FDMA, TDMA uses this 12.5 kilohertz carrier right here. So if you looked at a spectrum analyzer, kind of like one of these things you see in the background on my slide here, you would see that carrier, the F sub 0, which would be your center, would be here, and there'd be 6.5 kilohertz on this side, 6.5 6.25 kilohertz on this side, 6.25 kilohertz on this side. So this is what a frequency or time division and frequency division. The only difference is that in time division, there may be, or in frequency division, I'm sorry, there may be information in this section and there may be information in this section. Whereas time division, it would all be the same one, it would just be changing up and down, up and down, up and down. So now we're kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of what digital has to offer. What digital has to offer us amateurs. And I took this from one of the C4FM handouts from the Yaesu site. But as you can see here, the green line represents the variation of the analog readability. Blue is the variation of digital readability. So for analog, the area that is above the blue line and below the green line is good for analog communication, okay? So here we go, digital, we're running along, analog, we're getting a little noisy, digital's all good. Everybody's doing fine until they get to this thing called the digital cliff. And I'm talking, when you get to the digital cliff, you fall off of it. Because that's where your bit error rate goes way up, and your signal to noise ratio can't support the call or the channel, and the call and the channel goes away. In analog, good old analog, we can get way on out here. We can really ride that bad boy out here to the edge of the curve. However, out here is usually beyond 12 dB SINAD. It's going to take a really good ear, maybe some headphones or something sometimes to hear it as it rides out here towards the infinite blue yonder. Another way to look at that is look at the analog versus digital and look at the SINAD and versus bit error rate. So on this chart right here, or this graph right here, we have the bit error rate, and on this side we have the signal to noise ratio, and down here we have the RSSI, or received signal strength. This would be how many bars you have, or what the signal strength of your mobile shows. So as you can see, out here, this crossover point out here, we have a bit error rate of around 5%, which is sustainable, okay? But out here beyond there, as the analog goes down, we can still hear it, but it's really, really bad. We're beyond 12 dB SINAD. We're not sounding very good here. But as I reach this point, the area in between here is where I get my real boost for digital. This is clear as a bell. I'm riding down the road and the channel is clear. Everything is good. There's no background noise. There's nothing. And this is the same thing that happens with a cellular or a commercial call. As you're riding down, you've got this great area that everybody goes, oh yeah, my digital radio will pick up way further than my analog radio. Not true. Your digital radio just sounds better further, but when it goes, it goes. And that's why this little thing I call the digital cliff here is when you get out here beyond 5 dB or 5%, it's gone. It's just going to drop off, and you're going to start taking errors. And the best thing to do is to get some aluminum foil or get yourself an outdoor antenna. So anyway, fusion. A little bit about fusion. There's different data types in fusion. You got voice mode, this simultaneous voice data communications mode 1. And Mike McKay and I ran into this the other day. The mobile FTM 400 has got a mode on it where it's called digital. It's got digital narrow, and I think it's digital wide. VW, voice wideband. When you're in digital narrow, you're in one of these two modes right here. Basically what's happening is there's other messages that can be sent. In this case, an SMS message or APRS information. Because as I'm riding around in my car, my radio is actually telling me N5DU is 12.2 miles from your location, because my APRS is sending that information back over the channel, and it's showing up. It's telling Mike how far I am away from him as well. It's really cool. Voice data mode type 2 is for larger data. Say, for example, that when Mike keys up his radio and he calls me, my picture appears on the screen. So I don't think there's a lot of people taking advantage of that. And then you got data full rate mode, and that's for only sending data. And you got voice RF mode, and that's for full rate voice. Now note that when you're in voice full rate mode, there's no overhead data occurring. And we discovered that kind of inadvertently a couple of weeks ago. We were driving around, and I had my radio in voice full rate, Mike had his radio in voice full rate, and he says, I'm not seeing how far away you are. Well, because I wasn't sending my APRS information out of that overhead channel, so in this other mode right here. So he couldn't tell how far. And as soon as I switched over, boom, it came up on the screen, showed my bearing and everything else, so it was pretty cool. So then the mode selections, these are actually on the modes that you select on the FTM 400 or one of the C4FM radios. You got voice data simultaneous, which is one of these two subtypes. Full rate voice, which we talked about right here, which is using the full 12.5 kilohertz of the channel for data. You got data full rate, which is about 7,200 kilobits that you can transmit, and then you got good old narrowband analog. So we can fix that thing into analog, and we can talk analog all day and all night. Sounds good. It's 12.5 kc versus 25, but still it sounds good. Here you can kind of see a little bit. This is another piece of clip art that I stole from the Yaesu site. You can see a little bit of how it's chopping up that 12.5 kc. You got digital voice in part. You got data over here, so each of those are taking 6.25 kilohertz. This is the voice full rate. It's taking up the full 12.5 kilohertz. Then you got digital data, which is taking up the full 12.5 kilohertz too. And I think the maximum supported here, even though the channel is 9,600 kilobits, I think with error correction, you can only get about 7,200 per second there. So this is, to me, Frank and I were talking the other day about this C4FM, and we're pros and cons and so forth. And one of the things that I think that Yaesu has done is they've added the ability to link the repeaters via VoIP. I know we're doing it with All-Star, I know we're doing it with Echolink, but Yaesu kind of came out with a standard setup, standard architecture. I'll run through that real quick here. You got direct communication, so you can go source to destination. Mike Flanagan and I, a couple of weeks ago, we were coming from somewhere. We turned our radios both to 146.52, and we put it in C4FM narrowband mode. And we drove, where did we drive from? Pearl to about the Waterworks curve on like 10 watts. And it was clear as a bell. So this is direct communications between the source and the destination. The next mode that they came up with, of course, the standard 4, was the source to repeater through destination, which is typically what we're doing right now with any repeater in the area. We've got a mobile out here, it's repeated, it comes back out. Then the next mode, which I think is really where C4FM and the whole Fusion architecture is going to be super, super useful, is the, actually, I'm sorry, this is not the one. This one is where you have a source station and you're going VoIP over the internet to a VoIP back to destination station. Now, this is one example, because this source station here could be a repeater. Okay? In other words, we could have a repeater out here, have a HRI 200 hooked up to it, which I'll show a map of in a minute, and then have that HRI send that channel over the internet via VoIP come out to another repeater. So the goal that the Intertie is, and a lot of clubs are trying to come up with, is to be able to link a repeater in Meridian to a repeater in Jackson via VoIP. And have that repeater do all the work, not have to have a node at somebody's house or have something set up, kind of hodgepodge. They want to have the repeater do all the work. The only problem is, and I'll show in a minute, is that repeater at that station has to be similar to a D-Star. It has to have a computer hooked up to it. And then, of course, this is a scenario where you've got many repeaters hooked up, via VoIP, where these source stations could be repeaters or they could be individual stations. This is an example of, in the Yaesu world, of what they call a room, where in D-Star, I think you can do it too. You can log in and you can join a group. In Yaesu, they call it a room. We've actually got a room called Magnolia Intertie. What we're going to do is we're going to be able to hook Anderson, Raymond, maybe another site in Jackson, all into that room. And during an event, we can have all of those repeaters on the same, the same room, transmitting the same audio. And there's a lot of people already doing that right now. We just are getting the backbone set up now. So the Wires X concept, you heard me talking about the HRI 200. You got a FTM 400, you got it in your car, you can talk to your base station, and this could be your source station here. No repeater involved here. Similar goes out over the internet, comes out on another station in Tokyo, Japan, or wherever. It doesn't matter, because this dude right here is maintained by Yaesu. It's their server, you're in and out, and it's very seamless, but there's no repeater. This is source station, or a mobile station to source to internet, back to mobile, or source station back out to a handheld or one of their other units. I'm going to switch to this slide because this is better. This is the scenario that I was just demonstrating. You have a mobile station out here, you have a DR1, you have an HRI 200, which is their interface box. You have it set up to a site PC, goes out to the web. It's authenticated by the Wires X server, then it goes out to wherever your destination is. That destination could be here, it could be in Beaumont, Texas, it could be in New York City, wherever. The beauty is this audio stream is unbelievable. I had a unit set up in my garage on testing when we set the unit up for Anderson. I had it linked to a site over in Beaumont, Texas, and it was like they were in the same, in the same room with us. I mean, it was super, super clear. The VoIP audio through this gateway is outstanding. This I think is probably the biggest advantage to what Yaesu has to offer right now, is the ability to hook this dude up, not have to worry about an RF link out here back to another site, but to link these things up via VoIP and have a consistent configuration where they're authenticated. Anybody can get on and connect via your mobile. I can be on my mobile over here and I want to connect to this repeater. I dial that number in, boom, I'm coming out that other repeater. Or I can be in a room, I want to come out in a room, and all these other repeaters are hooked in. I put that room number in, boom, we're all in the same room. It's very, very seamless. Robert can help me with this. This is what the inside of the DR1 looks like. I told you a minute ago, it's basically two FTM 400s. One is set up as a transmitter. That's what these heat fins are here for. They're basically synced on the top of this unit. There's a forced air fan that pulls air through here. This is the receiver unit, and then you can't really see underneath there. There's a switching power supply, and there's some logic boards back here. But everything basically, it's just basically two FTM 400s. In fact, you can hook up a display from an FTM 400, one of these, and look and see what it's doing. You can change the squelch levels on these things by hooking a display up to them. Or the receiving unit is pretty cool. And in the back here, there's some connectors for power, USB. There's an accessory port that pulls out some of your push to talk, your receive audio, and so forth. The front panel is very simple. You got your different mode selections here. You got an automatic mode select for both transmit and receive, and you got fixed mode. Right now, in this example, I have it set for fixed. That's basically 12.5 kilohertz audio in, analog, 12.5 kilohertz audio out. Very, very simple. This is a conventional repeater right here. If I put one of these in auto, when I transmit it in digital, it would always come out analog. And that's the way we have the 8.8 machine at St. Dominic set up. If I want to transmit in analog audio, it'll come out analog. But if I want to talk to Don Loper on analog, because he has his analog rig in his car, he can hear me because it'll always come out analog. Now, the catch here is when I set this thing to auto, that's when the receiver will automatically mimic what the transmitter has, okay? So if I'm going in analog, I'm going to come out analog. If I go in digital, I'm going to come out digital. If I'm an analog user, if I've got a Bofang or an ICOM and I don't have C4FM, when that auto is set and I go in digital, and I come out, I'm gonna hear noise, I'm gonna hear the data burst. Just psh, lots of data, lots of noise. The way to prevent that, and what we started doing, is we set the signaling up in your radio to where the transmitter on this is transmitting a tone, okay? So right now, in order to access a repeater, you need like a 77 hertz tone. You plug that in your radio, it keys up, carrier squelch opens up, boom, you got a signal. But a lot of times, we're not transmitting that tone back to your radio to open your squelch up. So what we're doing on these fusion boxes, in order to prevent people from hearing all that data, is we're transmitting that tone so that you can turn your receive CTCSS on, okay? You know when you're programming your tones, it says transmit tone, receive tone. You can set that receive tone to say 77 hertz. Then when I key down on my radio in digital mode, you never hear me because you're listening for that 77 hertz tone, and it's not sent over that digital carrier. But Donald or Mike or anybody else that's got a C4 FM radio, they're hearing everything great. Then say, for example, Mike comes in and says, I've got analog. He transmits in analog. It comes out analog. It transmits a 77 hertz tone. My radio opens up. Voila, I can hear the conversation. So I'm not bothered by all the digital carrier noise. All right. The other display is basically just the front panel. And of course, this is your uplink and your downlink frequency. And this one's set for low power. You got a squelch setting. But this is the native screen that the repeater sits in, right here. And I think everybody's probably seen this. These are the only C4FM capable radios that are available. The FTM400, which many of us already have. The FT1DR, which several folks have. And I think Mr. McKay has splurged and bought this guy right here, which is the latest handheld. The 991, which I know one guy that's got this. It's a wonderful radio. It's HF. It's VHF, UHF, HF. And then this 100DR they just came out with at Dayton. It's basically this radio, but it's a single VFO, and but it's got built-in APRS. It's all ready to go, but it's a single VFO, whereas this one's dual. And as you see, the price point on this one's $399, and this one's $599. But I think they were running this one on sale not long ago.
So had a $100 rebate on the 400.
Yeah,
60 on the 100.
that was about $150 difference, I think, between these two. And I would always want that dual VFO. This is a good radio. So anyway, the radios, what do they come standard with? 2 meter, 70 centimeter analog. They're dual band. APRS is built in. Alert 1 button QSY support. Mike says he hadn't been able to get it to work. I haven't tried it. It's got an integrated GPS that works beautifully. 1200, 9600 baud TNC. You can't get to it. It's a little hard to get to, but it's built in. It's got a broadcast receiver built in where you can be listening to AM and FM. It's got break-in whenever you're listening to that. If somebody calls you, it'll open up the receiver. AM receiver built in. Only one vendor selling it. And there's an unclear path forward for homebrew development. But what I understand is, we're talking to Johnny, is there are some folks out there that are developing in that Yaesu space right now for C4FM. And then the biggest thing I think that all the digital modes right now have, except for maybe DMR, is it's a little cost prohibitive. It's expensive. I wish that they were cheaper, but you know, they're making their money off of selling handhelds.
Considering the price of when I first got into ham radio, my first 2 meter radio was a Kenwood TN2570. It was a 70 watt radio, $525.
Man.
Now you can get the same radio.
Yeah.
Maybe Icon's V8000 for $160.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean,
Price that comes out.
I couldn't believe how much that they, you know, just regular analog FM radios have come out that they really have. So this is something I think was asked a little earlier about where are the C4 FM radios right now. So we've got the one at Raymond, 441-700 with a 77 hertz tone. That one is running in AMS mode, so it's AMS. It means you go in analog, you come out analog. Go in digital, you come out digital. Then we are transmitting a 77 hertz tone on that one. Then we've got the JARC unit, which is over at the rooftop of St. Dominic's, 146.8. It's in automatic mode in, but fixed FM out. And that's 146.88 with 77 hertz tone. Then we've got the Rankin machine, which we put up just a couple of weeks ago, 449. Needs 100 hertz home. And that one's also in AMS mode. And then Forrest, Donald's machine, is over right here off of 35, and it's 145.24. It needs 100 hertz, and it's AMS too, according to ours pump. So that's the grid right now. JRC is going to be putting one up in Madison. We're also going to be working with CMSARA for the one down here at Monterey. Where I think this machine will move down to Monterey down here. And then the Intertie is going to have machines dotted all the way along the highway, or the Interstate 20 corridor here from Vicksburg to Meridian. But that's really, it in a nutshell as far as D-Star. Fusion. I hope I didn't bore everybody with the details about the modulation, but it is a lower order modulation as far as digital goes for FSK, but it's easy to implement, and it also is it's got a lot of other folks out there using P25s using it, DMRs using it, so it's got some adoption. I look for the day where there's a mobile out there that has all the modes built in it, but I'll probably be dead. Anyway, that's basically it. If there are any questions, I'll be here for a little while to take questions or confuse you guys a little bit more, but I appreciate everyone having me.
Quick question.